So is the mic on? Okay. All right. Hopefully, we only have one person on Zoom so far. It's David, but hopefully David can hear us and we won't have a repeat of last month's technical.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, David. And I do want to say I did get many emails and texts at the end of the meeting last month. But unfortunately, I don't check my email or my text during meetings, so we didn't know we were having technical difficulty until David spoke up. So don't hesitate to speak up. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's 4 o'clock. Let's do a roll call. Okay, we have MJ, we have Dee, we have Nona, we have Wanda, we have Jennifer, and we did have our town council liaison, Craig. So I think MJ, you can say that Craig was here because he just went out to make a call, I think. Okay. So does anyone have any oral communications for items not on the agenda?
One quick comment. We can't actually see anyone. If that's okay, and it's audio only.
Oh,
Great, but
hold on.
oh, there
I
we go.
got
That's
it.
much better.
Yay. Huh. Yes. Isn't that interesting? Well, nothing I can do about it. But they can see us. Isn't that odd? That's fine though. Okay. And there's only one person on Zoom right now, and it's Dave Carden, so. Yeah, okay. So no one has any communications. All right. So first thing, I'd like to have approval of the minutes for February 21st. Do I have a motion? Motion, second? Okay, so Wanda made the motion, Dee made the second. Show of hands. We're approving minutes. Oh, okay, okay, it passed unanimously, okay. And for those of you in the attendees, we had Daniel Warren join us on Zoom. So first order of business is fire marshal updates, and at the update, we're not going to talk about 2401 or supporting documents. That's going to be for item 4B. So Kim, go ahead. Do you have updates?
Okay, good evening, everybody. First update I wanted to have was the last time we had the meeting, one of our topics of discussion was on the Jasper Ridge burn. So I just wanted to give an update and a follow-up on that. Everything went very well. Well, it was a successful event. They got about to 100 and I believe it was 50-ish, 170 or something piles done. They wanted to keep going, but just given weather conditions and everything, they just decided to, over time, they're just going to scatter what was left. But the fuel moisture was great. So it was great timing for burning. We didn't have a large call volume at all. There wasn't complaints. So I think the outreach done by Stanford here, a collaborative effort of getting the word out, worked well, and people were educated and updated. I also wanted to just give an update. So one of our engines, engine 8, actually went and was able to participate. This particular captain took his crew. He had a brand new firefighter on his crew who's never experienced wildfire. This was a great training, and he had said that it was truly invaluable for his guys to see this terrain, the fuel, the slope. And he said it was such a phenomenal experience for a brand new green probationary firefighter to experience live fire in that kind of setting, and assigned that was actually in our district where they didn't have to leave the district to go do training. So it was here in our backyard. So it was really eye-opening, and it's certainly a great opportunity rather than going through a didactic classroom training. There's nothing like in, live, all your equipment. And because it was muddy and soft, it wasn't easy to walk these miles of getting to where they are with their equipment and everything. So it just brought a lot of practical experience for them. I wanted to let you all know that we're almost near the end for the Fire Station 7 in Woodside. That finally, we have our crews have moved in a couple weeks ago. Fire department, funny enough, fire department prevention did the inspections at Station 7 and everything went well. So we've given them a temporary certificate of occupancy, couple of things that are on the exterior that still need to be finalized. And once all those things are done and tested, then we'll be almost pretty much there. So making good progress. We're looking forward to having our grand opening to invite everybody to walk through and check it out. So that'll be great. I also wanted to let everybody know that though it doesn't encompass a lot of the town of Portola Valley, still something worth mentioning. We are incorporating two things into our fire aside program, which is the home assessment software that we're using to do our defensible space inspections. That there's also going to be a FireWise component added to it. Basically what this does, it follows the exact FireWise template as what FireWise creates, but it's embedded within Fireside so that it's collecting the data and all the information into one report. And that way we can collectively be able to pull filters and reports of saying, okay, in this community, let's just say, make it easy, 100 homes that are going to be a FireWise community. They finish all the requirements. We do all our assessments. We're looking at, we could pull a report and say, okay, how many of these 100 actually still have wood shake roofs? Or how many of them, you know, still have single pane windows? So we'll be able to filter. It won't be necessarily a target to properties themselves. It'll just be as a collective whole. What are we looking at percentage wise? So we'll be able to pull a lot of data that way. It also makes it easier when it comes to renewal for these FireWise communities that we have this information already. And because now that we're going to be moving forward with this ordinance and doing inspections on all properties, that this is just more data that'll be collected over time. The other thing that is being added that we are working on is it's a grant module. So when there are grants, for example, Town of Woodside, we know they have their matching fund. Los Trancos, they have an incentive program. So we are encompassing those into our Fireside, which basically when we go to a specific property that's within those boundaries of where that grant exists, and it could be any grant that comes into play. But what it will do is when the homeowner gets a report, it's going to have, let's say we say, you know, I don't know, you need the recommendation of vents around your home. Let's just say, you know, you need to change out your vents. Well, there'll be a box that comes up, which will say this qualifies for this particular grant. So it's going to identify the things that qualify for that incentive program for the grant. So homeowners know, oh, hey, I can take advantage of this grant and use it towards these things. So it's going to be great as we move forward and hopefully trying to get more grants are out there and just we'll have that availability. We'll be able to put in the amount of money, how much is being funded, how much people are taking advantage of it, how much is being used, how much is left. So it's going to be great for the people who are managing the financial side of the grant program. I also wanted to bring up something new and different. We are looking at a possibility, and it's just a possibility in exploration. Flame Mapper, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, the company that a while ago was hired to do mapping for the town of Portola Valley. But one of the other resources that we're utilizing them for is also for temporary refuge areas. We're utilizing them for a lot of different things, fire modeling, seeing how fires will go through here, what evacuation is going to be affected. We're utilizing them in other ways, but another way is they have a product called a beacon box. And it's basically a red box and it's for fire department use only, but not our local. It would be so in case if there was a wildfire and responding agencies from outside our area are coming in, it's where they can get in. It's basically with a lock that fire departments would be able to break open and get in. But it has 3 different ways of delivering mapping and information to what our area looks like, where addresses are, where hydrants are, where the resources they would need to help support us during a wildfire. And so that's what this box would be for, so that because they're not familiar with our area at all. They're coming in blinded, not knowing where anything is. So this would give them an operationally knowledge of our district of how to get to places, or if there's road closures, we can communicate that to them and they can see on a map, okay, this is closed. Let's not go this way. We need to take this route, what have you. So this is something that's a strategic way of placing these throughout the district. We haven't gone into detail where the most prominent areas where the thought was at the entrances of and exits of our district. So the outermost sides of actually coming into our area is maybe having them placed. So anyway, that is just something we're exploring, but I thought it was a pretty cool thing to have to help support our outside agencies coming in to assist us. I also wanted to update you on 2 weeks ago, most of the prevention staff, we were away at a week's conference. It is the California Fire Prevention Institute Conference. It is one of the largest fire prevention conferences in California. It is when Northern California and Southern California fire prevention officers and everybody in the industry, including fire alarm companies, sprinkler companies, everything you can think of that has to do with prevention, come together for a conference for different classes and training and products and knowledge of what's out there. So pretty much our whole division was there, all our inspectors, our public education, our fuel, actually not our fuel mitigation guys, but our public education, we were all there. So that was a great conference. There's another conference that most of us are all attending, except for one will also be staying back just at the last one. This is the Wildfire, the WUI conference, Wildland Urban Interface Conference. It's held in Reno every year. So most of us will be there during actually next week. We leave this weekend, but we'll be there for a week. And that's also a very large specific conference. There's people from out the United States that travel all from everywhere just to go to Reno to this conference because it's very specific on wildland urban interface. So where we can do an exchange of ideas, classes, training, products, all that kind of stuff. So I also wanted to give you a quick update on what's going on in our fuel mitigation world. So that also falls under the prevention division, and that's fuel mitigation. Those are our guys that are out doing all the right-of-way work. They're the ones who do our chipping during chipping season. So chipping season is going to start in May 6th. That's when it'll be starting, and everyone's going to be getting their letters by end of this month. So next week to first week of April, everyone should be getting their letters of knowing when their chipping date is going to be. They have worked, our fuel mitigation crew has also worked with us. We've put out a new policy for basically it's a storm coverage. So when there's severe storms, our guys come and they help out cover when there's fallen trees or trees that are obstructing roads, rather than tying up our fire engines on cutting these and moving these aside for them to be available for actual medicals or other emergencies. Our fuel mitigation guys go out there and they've been clearing the roads during these horrible storms to make sure that there's no obstructions in our roadways. So that's something, one of the valuable things that they do as well. The crew also did some clearing on the row, clearing in Portola Valley. They lifted ladder fuels adjacent to Jasper Ridge and tying their perimeter clearance project all together with what Stanford was clearing as well. So we kind of all met full circle there. The mitigation work. So one of the grants that we have is a Skyline project, which was up on Skyline, and it went from Page Mill to 92. So it was about a 25-mile span. They've been working up there and they're pretty much done. It was a 3-year grant and they finished way ahead of schedule, which was great because they weren't sure how long it was going to take. So now they're just going back to the beginning and kind of doing some cleaning up because of the storms. It really destroyed what they had already done for maintenance. So that's that's something else they've been doing. And then as far as our public education and emergency preparedness, they're almost done with their CERT training. So we had a new CERT program that was coming through. It's a 7-week program. The last day of skills will be on March 23rd. So that's almost coming to an end. The Corte Madera School in Ormondale. We just did Ormondale today, and a couple weeks ago we did Corte Madera, but we did fire extinguisher training with the staff, which was great. Going along with the staff, teaching them about fires, how to use extinguishers. We actually have a fire pan that lights, and people need to extinguish that and actually feel what it's like using extinguisher. So that was done at both schools. And then lastly, our public education emergency preparedness coordinator, I think everybody knows Selena. Selena was up at the Sequoia Healthcare District. She was looking to get some funding to get their third CERT command post trailer, and they approved the funding, which was around 45,000 to help fund for a third CERT trailer. And this one most likely will be stationed up in the Skyline, Los Trancos Vista Verde area. So now we'll have a trailer that's in every area of our district spread out with all the resources needed to help support in case of any kind of emergency. And that is all I have for updates. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anyone on the committee have any questions? Go ahead, MJ.
Tim, the work that's going on Sand Hill Road, like today, is that you guys or is that Woodside, Town of Woodside?
That is we have done some on Sand Hill, and then they have been doing some. And it's not Woodside. I want to say that it's or I think it might be some of it is it's county. It's county area. So I think county is doing some work there. We are working with PG&E and seeing if we can get some more clearance on, we're looking to do a Sand Hill project with the eucalyptus trees and removal of those. So that's something that's in discussion and trying to work with getting that project underway with the support from PG&E because their trees are going into the power lines as well anyway, those trees. But it would just be best to remove them since they are in one of our major evacuation routes.
Anyone else on the committee?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. First of all, congratulations on the fire on the Jasper Ridge burn. I was invited to one of our residents' homes and got to witness it. You did a great job of allaying her fears, and the planning and execution, like from top to bottom, it just went really well. She was super appreciative, and I would just love to see more of that, right? Like, I'm just a fan, and whatever we can do to help you promote, again, the education around that, and maybe smaller places or other parcels that are available. Just big congratulations and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Stanford's really happy with that success too. They actually had their media coverage, which are going to be creating videos to share with us and to be able to post out to the residents so they could actually see what it looked like. So residents, another way of educating them and showing the value and all that stuff. So that'll be cool when that gets released.
Right on.
Okay, so I have two questions. So one is about this beacon. So this would be in case all cellular went down, and is that something where they open it up and there's like an iPad they take out, or do they link it to their system?
So there's 3 methods that they have included in case of depending on circumstance. They have a very large, it's not like just any kind of laminate, but it's a special one that they can throw on their hood of their vehicle. So it's all open, it just sticks there, and it's the whole district. They also have smaller laminated sizes, and then they also have a flash drive. So if they had put it into their iPads, laptops, whatever device they have, and then they also have a QR code. So depending on if cellular is down, obviously those won't work, but they still have hard maps. So they have all 3 different ways that they can access information.
Good idea. Okay, I have a second question. So this is on the Portola Valley evacuation plan, and it's on the town website. I think it's also on the fire district website. It was created by the Emergency Preparedness Committee, and everyone should read it. It's an incredibly well-written document, and it really goes to show how sometimes you don't need to pay a consultant, that really smart committee members can do something really well. And I on page 28, I know this was not in the agenda packet, but they mention under Appendix A, or excuse me, Appendix 2, shelter in place information. And in this, they say, in case of wildfires, a good shelter in place structure needs to have been prepared with defensible space and home hardening. And then they point to our website and a couple other websites that you can go to find out about home hardening and defensible space. And then they do note, and the use of shelter in place should only be used if safe evacuation is not possible. Early evacuation helps everyone. And then they have a sentence, the school district and the Sequoias have had extensive preparation in creating safe emergency shelter in place facilities. So I would just like you to answer two things. So first, I would like you to emphasize to residents that just because they have an ember resistant roof and vents does not mean that their house is safe for shelter in place. And I just would like you as a professional to emphasize.
So
And-
just
and-
as a, yeah, and
then
just as a,
second part,
oh,
I'd
sorry.
also like to talk about the school district and the Sequoias and what the plan is for shelter in place and how that might look and how you might do that.
So shelter in place is definitely a last resort. We want early evacuation, just get out of the area. When we are constructing homes or updating our homes for home hardening, it's for resiliency of the fire to hope that your house will still be standing with your defensible space. You're doing all the things that we're trying to do. Everything between defensible space and home hardening, the whole goal is to increase the survivability of your home should a wildfire come. There's no guarantee, but from research and what we've seen, it does help. Lots of houses have been still left standing after a wildfire, given all the measures, if a property owner chooses to do so. But it's in no means a reason to just hang out in your house, because it doesn't mean that it's 100% fail safe. Fire, smoke will find its way however it can. And you can only do so much of trying to home harden, even if your house is built to Chapter 7A because it's new construction. Yes, it is safer than other homes. And in the worst case scenario, if it started in your backyard or so close to you that you can't get out, then, and that's your only resort is to shelter in place, then that's the last resort. But that is certainly not at all what we would want. Now, as far as the Sequoias and the town of Portola Valley schools, they have gone under major remodels being built up to Chapter 7A. They have done more than Chapter 7A. They've gone over and above, and only because of the population that is in there. And if it came to a need and a call, because everything, we can't always know every circumstance till they start happening. If they were not able to evacuate early enough because everything was coming too quick, they are in a good place to be able to shelter in place because their buildings have gone over and beyond the need of most people's homes. So they have been equipped. They have HVAC systems that shut down so that it's not circulating air. So there are a lot of parameters that are put in place in these buildings that are not the same as a residential house because these are commercial buildings or built differently. So therefore, yes, it would be safe. They have the defensible space around them, certainly because of the population. If it came to be that they couldn't evacuate early enough, the first place that all resources, as far as the fire department goes, will be at those locations, knowing that there are people there and they will be protecting those structures because of the population in there. That's what they would be. That would be their focus of Firefront, is protecting those buildings. So that's where they would be concentrating their efforts if it came down to that. But that's last resort.
Thank you. Okay, so we have David, you have a question.
I do. I guess it's a question / comment. First of all, this is great. I think we've all been suffering. First of all, I assume you can hear me okay? Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
We've all been suffering with, I don't know, 15-year-old maps. So it's great that all this is being updated. I think the Flame Mapper work, I've been tracking Flame Mapper since their inception. They used to be a couple guys and this and that, but they've gotten a lot better. It's amazing to me. And I'm glad Matt Miller raised the money so that we could afford to pay them to do a study. My question is, I think it's really useful data. And obviously, our fire marshal correctly thinks is useful data, but none of it has ever been released, as far as I know, to us, the public. So if we have new maps of any kind that are better than the Moritz maps or the Cal Fire maps or whatever from the dinosaur era, I would love to see those public, since we, the public, I think paid for them, and I don't see why they need to be private. So I think that would be very helpful for us as a community in planning. Otherwise, it's very hard to plan where to put things and what to do if we're fighting blind and we don't really know the current state of where everything is. So that's my comments, us question. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that because I know it's been something that's circulated around the community. So I have finally met with Flame Mapper because I was trying to have an understanding and grasp on historically what has happened with Flame Mapper. And my understanding, because they could not replicate utilizing the same metrics that CAL FIRE does, that it didn't run consistent with being able to utilize them for a fire hazard severity zone map. But I will say, in looking at it, and it certainly is something that we're working on putting together to release to the public, I am looking at actually utilizing it more as a WUI map and not anything to do with severity hazard zones or anything, but more utilizing it at where our vegetation is, because that's what part of their study was. They looked at where all our vegetation was in relation to structures. So I am looking at working on utilizing the data they collected to create a map in that way that we can release for the public to see. Will have nothing to do with the severity hazard zone maps, nothing to do with land use planning, because that's what those are used for. This will be more information only for us to be able to utilize for a mitigation measure and understanding of what our district looks like. In addition to that, like I was saying before, we have been using them to do different types of fire modeling. And once we're still working on the reports, because it is certainly something I want to share with the public, is creating fires at different locations to be able to see how the fire paths would work in our district, and seeing where we need to provide the most protection if a fire were to go in a certain direction, depending on wind patterns and topography. And so we're working on different points to see what that'll look like. So then we will understand, with working with our other company that we have, Ladris, and using them for part of that evacuation plan. So there's a lot of that we're working on, and it's still in the incipient phase of utilizing them, because there's certainly a great resource tool, as you have said, but we're not there yet to be able to release information. It's not in a reporting manner. It's not set up for a reporting yet, and I don't know what's happened before my time. I can just say that it's something that we are working on, because they have also helped us with the temporary refuge areas that are going to be incorporated into the town's evacuation plan. And they have been helping us with identifying those, and those will be incorporated in the evacuation plan. So right now, that's where they've been putting the focus, because we're kind of on a timeline trying to get that done. So that'll be the first part of the focus. And then the next part will be that WUI map. So just that's an update on that.
Well,
And I
thanks.
think-
We've spent $250,000
David,
on it.
let,
and I'm
David,
not sure-
David, let
Yeah,
me,
okay.
David, let me say something. Also, a few
Okay.
months ago, a Flame Mapper was here, and I think it might have been while Don was still here, and we all agreed that when CAL FIRE maps came out, Flame
Yes.
Mapper was going to come back and make a presentation to us. So you will have a chance to see a presentation from Flame Mappers at that time. That's in our meeting minutes.
Yeah, I want to make clear, I don't really care about whether it's CAL FIRE or not. We spent $250,000 on a bunch of maps the fire district is using, and no one in the public after 2 years has been able to see them. So I would love to see their results. I get that they're not final, but I'm not sure why they need to be super secret. But I guess if that's the way things go, I guess that's fine. But it seems weird to me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So any other questions? Oh, yes, go ahead. Fire side or fire top?
It's, the software that we'll be using for the home assessments is called Fire Aside, ASIDE. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, we're gonna move on. Okay. So we are on item 4B. Continued discussion on draft ordinance 2401 and supporting documents and vote to endorse 2401. Okay, so where are my notes in there? A little change. Wait a minute, let me see if I can find the notes that I printed out. I can't find it. Okay, so in your agenda packet, you will see a copy of 2401. But it is no longer the final draft. There will be a change that's going to be made. And also in your agenda packet, you will find a memo that I was asked to write last month, which we were going to vote on tonight to see if we wanted to endorse 2401. But obviously we can't vote because we don't have a final ordinance yet. But I would like to note that that memo was approved by the town manager, the town attorney, the mayor, the town liaison. And so that memo will be in our packet when we get the final ordinance. So my plan is that tonight, what we're going to do is I think we should continue the discussion and discuss the draft of 2401 that was in our agenda packet, because there were a lot of things changed. Tim can talk about what's going to be taken out. I think it'd be good to have that discussion. And then take a few seconds after that discussion to discuss the memo, just so that we're ready when we are ready to vote. And then after that, we're going to have a few minutes discussion on the guidelines document. And there's some things to discuss about that. Then next, and so I do want to also point out that the board, the district board, will not be voting on 2401 until their April meeting. And that's a week after our April meeting. So next month at our April meeting, rather than have the district workshop, we will have, hopefully, the final version of 2401 in our agenda packet, and we'll have the memo. So that's what we'll do in April. And then in May, we'll have the workshop, the district workshop. And by May, we will have the final version of the guidelines to accompany that workshop. So is there any questions about what I just said? Okay. So, let's start with a review of the 2401 draft that's in our agenda packet. I have a ton of questions. Does anyone have any questions about the draft that was in your agenda packet? You want me to start and then you can ask questions if, okay. So why don't we start by, Kim, can you explain to us, it did come out as a memo over the email. Can you discuss what was taken out, what you expect to be taken out of this draft?
Yes, so from this draft, the only thing that was taken out was out of section 5C, which is the adjacent parcel language. That whole section was taken out in its entirety. So now that no longer exists in the ordinance. So that was the reason, that was the change, and that is why we're doing the first reading again this month, because of that change. And the reason that change really came about is after a lot of discussion and listening to feedback from the residents and the concern from the residents and the conflicts that may arise out of this, and doing the research, making sure there is no legal requirement behind it, we felt comfortable enough saying, okay, there's nothing legal that says this needs to be done. Let's take it out. And the big concern, which giving a little history so everyone knows, the previous ordinances, the fire code ordinance 12, 11, 10, the ones that have been going on for the last 20 years that get adopted here every 3 years, there was a small portion in that that was called vegetation. I think it was like it's a perimeter clearance. And within that ordinance, they had 30 feet of perimeter clearance was required on all your properties. It had nothing to do with structures, just clearance. But clearance didn't mean taking all your trees. It was removal of dead, dying debris, grasses, weeds, all that kind of stuff is what that 30 feet was. Then it was increased to 50 feet on the last, on ordinance number 12. That got pulled out of the ordinance because we knew we were creating this fuel mitigation ordinance and we were going to put that in here. But rather than using the language that we had for the last 20 years in our ordinances, we used the language that the state had already put together in their Model D space template, and we left it as such. So that adjacent parcel clearing wasn't something that was very new. The thing that caused the impact is with the housing element, the whole construction of these ADUs. And that's really what's brought this to light of being concerned because of how close an ADU could potentially be built. So we have been doing reviews on ADUs for a long time. We have tons of ADUs that are being built in our district constantly. And with the number that we've seen, it's very rare that any of these are being constructed on a small parcel where people are actually putting it at a 4-foot setback. That I have to say that's maybe so far few in between. So given that, looking at the next few years, we decided by taking this out, we're going to observe. We're going to see what happens with the construction of ADUs as they keep moving forward and as we start doing more assessments. If it becomes a problem where we're seeing that this is creating issues with these ADUs and they are at that 4-foot setback and we're not getting any clearance around them, then we'll have sufficient evidence to say, based on what we've seen the last 3 years, we are now implementing that requirement in our ordinance. And we are able to do so. So we'll have the evidence to back that up. So at this point, this is why it was taken out.
Right.
Another question.
Yes, go ahead.
For clarification, you're saying the portion that came out is 5B like baby or 5C
No,
like
5C
Charlie?
as in Charlie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I've got a couple things, and they're not so many. I have a few questions, but mostly I want to point out some things that were added. And there's been so much history in this ordinance. I know this may be boring to some of you, but I think some of this language is very good language. And I think it's very interesting language. And I just want to point out to people that maybe didn't read this like 5 times like I did, that it's there. And so there's a lot packed in this. So under section 3, for applicability, there is a comment here that the district reserves the right to adopt reasonable rules and regulations. So you can modify, I read that as that you can modify slowly things that you realize aren't clear. But then in red, you've added this whole section that the guideline document that we keep talking about is going to be your vehicle to communicate that clarification. So that this guideline document is really going to be the way that you communicate with us to say, just to be clear, we've realized we want to point out these things. Is that correct?
That's correct. And what that stands, so this is the avenue of being able to have the standard and guideline. The standard and guideline is being created as an, this is a very legal document, legal language. It's hard to understand. So the standard and guideline would be an interpretation of this ordinance, and it's a defensible space and home hardening for the property owner. And it breaks down this ordinance as such as it is, breaking down each area. And what does that mean for the homeowner? What does that mean their action is? What are they supposed to do? Along with pictures, diagrams, arrows pointing to space, measurements, just so everyone has an understanding. It further depicts and clarifies the misunderstandings that people have had throughout this ordinance where they are under the false sense of thinking clearance means removing down to dirt, where clearance, not a good word, but again, it's a word that gets used, doesn't mean that. It means to maintain. It means to clean your dead, dying debris, your limbing up, all that different stuff. So this, and it also talks about what's going on in the appendixes with separation of your trees and bushes. It again says this is a recommendation and a guideline. This is not a thing where we're going to come through and enforce that spacing requirement. That is just there as a guideline. The state put that out. We just adopted it and added into our ordinance as well. That is what they wrote. So we just included that in there.
Okay, great. And then under section 4 for definitions, there's just a couple of very good definitions that were added about what is fire resistant vegetation. And it describes the type of plants. It describes mulch a little bit more. And then the one that I really found interesting is, and so many people asked this, zone 0, and it says how to measure it. And in measuring the distance from a structure in zone 0, distance is measured from the ground level foundation of the structure. In measuring from an attached deck, the distance is measured from the outer edge of the attached deck. How many people have asked that question? So it's some good addition of language. So this ordinance has come a long way. So under all zones, under all zones, A2, it says about climbing vines, and there's an exception. It's on page 18. There's an exception that was added, and I'm curious about it. Climbing vines greater than a ½ inch in diameter that are approved vegetations that are irrigated, cleared of dead material, located and maintained so they do not cause damage to any part of the structure as determined by the fire code official, except, et cetera. So you can have those type of vines. What kind of vine that's a ½ an inch would be okay? I'm trying to imagine a
That's a
safe
good
vine.
question. I don't have an answer to, but in the guidelines, I will find some research to give me some direction as to what those vines would be. But if you also read in the exception, unless you already have them, anything new will not be accepted. So
are you thinking grapevines?
no, so one of the communities here, Ladera, they have taken a lot of pride into the climbing vines that they have meticulously cared for, grown, very much taken care of. And that is where this exception kind of came from, was to help in support of that. It was basically for them. And it was something that after doing a lot of research and talking to a lot of experts in our field, that, how much of a problem would this be? Like, is this going to destroy a house if there was a fire? And if your house, let's say you have a wood shake roof and you have wood paneling, the vines are going to survive much longer than the house will. So that's kind of where that's where it was like, yes, that you're right. Actually, vegetation, if you look at, especially the presentation I just did for the town councils, I have that on our website, the slide deck. There's a really good picture in there that shows a fire that occurred. And if you look, every single house is flattened to the ground, but all the trees are green and living and standing all around them. It's just amazing. Vegetation, the vegetation has never been a concern to us about it necessarily burning. They'll burn, but they'll live. It's how they communicate to your structure and how they're going to affect your structure, right? And all of those that are dead, dying, dry.
Okay, all right. So but probably if you had a wood shake roof, the official may say you have to take down the vines or replace the roof, right?
At some point, yeah, but
Okay.
that would be the recommendation. We can't enforce on that.
Okay, all right. So on page 23, under phase compliance due to qualified circumstances of financial hardship, I just want to call out how robust the language has become about how if you have a lot of work to do, you can phase it in. And it's more than what I wanted. I mean, it's more than what I expected. It's everything I wanted. I will, say that for the guidelines, it sure would be nice to have a section that says, you know, when you send in your report, include your name, your address, a copy of your inspection. I think that might be a nice little page in your guidelines to give people a little bit of a solid structure of how to create this report. But this is really good language, and I was happy to see it.
I'd like to just add a side note to that because in researching, my staff helped research other jurisdictions who've already adopted this ordinance. Or some have actually, they called it their RUI ordinance. You know, different jurisdictions name it different things, but it's still the same thing. And places like Marin, who have had it since the 90s, I mean, they've had this language forever and have adopted this ordinance. They are so much more restrictive. I was reading, nobody has this phased compliance. Nobody gives 3 years for anybody to be, and I was only taken back only because I was like, wow, they're just like, it's this or nothing. I mean, you better just start doing these things. And I was just amazed. So for me, I was like, hey, we listened to the residents. We wanted to make this a slow moving process and a change. We knew it was going to be a process, but we wanted to also support those residents that needed more time or needed because maybe they have a lot of work to do. And we wanted to be supportive in that way. And that's why this came to be of having this phase compliance.
Well, this committee was very vocal in wanting that. Okay, so my last question is on Appendix B, continuous tree canopy. And there's a C and D, it just talks about the fire code official is going to determine the appropriate clearance. Is that just to kind of give you some, it's on page 32, Appendix B. It's the C and
Thank
D
you.
portion.
Oh, okay.
And is that just to give the inspector a little more latitude?
It is so that it's not so strict of saying you have to meet this, you know, because again, what the state had put out on the continuous tree canopy and the requirements of the spacing, we wanted to be able to give more latitude to people and be able to look at the whole property as a whole. Is this really necessary, or do we have enough of a fuel break between all their vegetation to their house? So it's just so that there is room for modification.
And then my last questions, and then we'll turn it over to attendees. So if you were talking to a resident who wasn't sure they wanted to schedule an inspection, they were kind of thinking, well, maybe it'd be better to wait 3 years. Is there any benefit for getting in early? Any perhaps more latitude, or are you going to be in a better mood than you will be in 3 years?
I will say, so I'm working right now on posting onto our website. So there will be a schedule posted because obviously not every community is being inspected this year. So if you are not one of those communities being inspected this year, and let's say you're on our 3rd year, because we're doing this year, next year, and you're either next year or the year after, getting an inspection now, it doesn't start any kind of time clock because you're getting it now. You're not even in the community that we're assigning our inspectors to go hit. This is just a separate, in addition community, unless your house is within the community that we are inspecting this year. That's a different story. Then we'd be working on, okay, what's going to be your approach? But if you get it done now and you're not till year 2 or 3, you're just getting a jump on the whole thing so that when we come in the 2nd or 3rd year, whenever it is your turn, you're already kind of ahead of the game and starting to work. So then from that point, and let's say you did need 3 years more, you would have these years plus the 3 years, and kind of you're looking at maybe like even a 5-year time period to break down everything that you need to do on your property. So it does give you more time.
Boy, that would be nice if you could get some kind of text approved by them, MJ. Wouldn't that be an incredible tip? To get an inspection early so you have more time? No? I'll think about it. Okay. Let's David?
Sure, thanks. First of all, it's hard to express how amazing the progress has been. So thank you to Fire Marshal Giuliani. I'm a total supporter of both the 2401 and the process. It's night and day compared to where we were before. So we've gotten lots of input. She's had tons of meetings. Everybody who is paying any attention has been able to say what they want. Um, I, I think it's amazing. It's way better than where we were a couple of years ago. So I'm all on board, and I think it's a great. We all want veg management, and this is a great way to do it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
So Kim, I know you have to do like, your goal is to do 3,000 inspections or
It's
2,000?
2,000 a year.
2,000 a year. So it sounded like, are you already sort of mapping out where you're going to start with that?
So the Fireside company who does our software, they have our district and they were nice enough to break up because with the number of inspectors that we have, so it's basically 4 groupings of inspectors. Each one would be taking on 500 inspections, 500 parcels. And so that would give you your 2,000 parcels for the year. And so what Fireside did for us is they broke each grouping into groups of 500 parcels. And we just zoned them like zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And so with that, that is how it's going to be okay, and, inspector, you're doing zone 1, you're doing zone 2, you're doing zone 3, you're doing zone 4. That's it. Then next year, case zone 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the year after 9, 10, 11, 12.
So are you going to, I assume you're going to start doing this pretty soon. Are you going to
Yes,
tell
we wanted
the
to.
public?
We wanted to,
This one?
yes. So the letters with that you'll be getting with your chipping schedule also talks about the inspection starting, and they'll be starting in April. So even though we will not have adopted the ordinance, we can certainly start, it's going to be adopted. I don't see there being really any changes to what's already in here. So once it's adopted, it becomes enforceable, but we don't need to be enforcing anything right now. When we go out and do inspections, it's just an initial letting you know where we're at and getting the process going. So there's no need for us to start to delay anymore because it is a big impact. I think people forget that on top of the 2,000 parcels that my inspectors have to do, we also have construction going on. We have tenant remodels. We have apartment buildings coming in. We have a lot of other inspections we do. It's not just houses. So, and those come at, we have around anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 a year inspections that we do. And that's only initials. That doesn't include going back for a final. We do rough-ins. We do all sorts of things. So this is an impact on them. So the less time we have, we're creating more of a challenge for us.
Yeah, if you could just clarify, excuse me, my voice is going out. If I called for a volunteer inspection, how do you fit that in? Is that a different person that comes out?
It would just be any inspector that gets scheduled who's available for whenever it is that you want to come out.
Uh-huh. So you're looking at that. I mean, it looks like you have a really busy schedule, right? Like, that's what I'm trying to get to. If we as a committee are encouraging folks to volunteer and, to go ahead and ask for an inspection, how does that impact your schedule?
We will just have to, so far, even as much as we've been trying to get people to,
You haven't
they're-
seen a bunch.
they're so
Okay.
far few in
Okay.
between.
Right
yeah.
on. All right. Thank you.
Great if everyone's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I
If all
mean,
of a sudden if you
especially-
can come
yeah.
back next month and go, I can't fit this in, then we've done our job. Okay.
That's right. Then our outreach is working. But if it's already a community that we're going to be inspecting, it's going to be great because it'll already fall within what we're supposed to do. Everyone else are just getting a leg up and a head start.
So Kim, when you said Fireside broke things out into zones, they didn't target the worst areas first or the ones with the most vegetation first or anything?
No,
like
and I'll
that?
explain why for that, because that's been brought up. A town council member from Woodside had brought that up and they had said, maybe you should start in the very high. So let me tell you, historically, because that's what state law required, that is where the inspectors historically have always started, was in the very high, because that's really all we had enforcement power behind because that's all state law required. But with this ordinance, because it applies to the whole district and also with the understanding that, and again, my slide deck has a great picture of this, but with the understanding that the fire, wherever it's going, it's not going to stop according to high or very high or moderate. It's not, there is no boundary, there is no wall, it doesn't know a zone. It just knows fuel and it's just going to follow the fuel. But it was interesting because on the slide deck that I had, and I wish I had the image, but it broke down. It was a study in 2017, CAL FIRE put on one of their presentations, but they had the very high, moderate, all the way to urban. And they were showing the number of structures that were burned in wildfires. And it's amazing, but the high had more structures that were burned than the very high. And part of that understanding was because very high has been hit for so long on defensible space and home hardening that the high wasn't and neither was the moderate. And they had more structure destruction than the very high. Not by much, but still more.
So I had a question on the scheduling. I assume that if someone schedules an inspection voluntarily, they can be sure they'll be there when the inspection takes place. What about for the ones that are part of the zone approach? Will the schedule be well enough known that people will know how to be there, or do they really have to do the volunteer one in order to?
So so what we're going to be doing, so the inspector has their list. They're going to just start going to homes. They're going to knock on doors or ring doorbells, depending on how the house is set up. If the homeowner is home, perfect. They'll walk with the homeowner, do their defensible space. If the homeowner is not home, they're just going to do as much from the outside that they can see and then leave a door hanger for that homeowner to say, please call for a full inspection. And then they'll also be given their code so that they can already see what's already been done on a partial part of the report of what they can see. And our information in our software will tell, like we can direct and say, this was a partial inspection, limited view, homeowner did not walk with us, so that we know where we are. So when that person calls and we schedule, we can go back and continue where we left off and finish off the rest of the inspection.
Yeah, Daniel, you have a question.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for listening to all the feedback from the various communities served by the district. It's good to hear that the section about adjacent parcels is going to be, let's say, paused or taken out at the start just to see how things go. I think that'll probably be very helpful to make sure things will start moving on the right foot and get stuff going instead of causing too much tension, and see how important it is. I was curious if you could share a little bit more detail about what you were saying, that calling for a voluntary inspection sooner doesn't actually start the clock sooner, and that the enforcement clock doesn't really kick in until your community's time was going to have started. I feel like that could actually be a big factor in like helping encourage people to start sooner. So I know you addressed it, but it wasn't like totally clear how that would work. And then the other thing I was curious about was one of the things that we had brought up in Ladera, and I heard that the Woodside Town Council members also seem to share this concern about the appeals process and how the WFPD board is not really a neutral arbiter. I was wondering if that feedback from them was being considered for a further slight tweak of the ordinance. Thanks.
So first, your question. So because of knowing the impact that this ordinance was going to have, I decided that it would be best if people did to try and get people to start volunteering. And as people start to learn and understand the ordinance and what does it mean, and because we knew we were going to break up the district for doing annual inspections, was those who voluntarily wanted to call to schedule an inspection, as long as they didn't fall within the communities that are being inspected this year, that it would just be information, a head start on, hey, these are the things that you need to be doing. And when we come year 2 or year 3, whenever your community's turn is, these are the things that now we'll be saying, hey, now we're going to start enforcing and starting your time of seeing progress for compliance. And then for your second question, I actually had, let me see, where do I have it? Yeah, I'll have to bring it up. I wrote that down because there is a law code section that allows us to, or allows the board, let me find that. Because it's a lot easier. I don't want to lose its meaning and interpretation. Oh, but I actually have it on my phone. But basically there is a law that allows and actually gives authority to the board to be the appeals process. Now, if anyone's not satisfied with the outcome of the appeals process of whatever the fire board regulates, law gives us the power. You can go further on in legal terms if you wanted to pursue that more. But as far as our internal process, that's what that would be. But hold on just 1 second. Let me just pull this up really quick. Sometimes I know pulling up things on our phones do not always work the best. It's all about how you put something in there.
Actually, just a quick aside while you're trying to pull that up, do you think you'd
Yeah.
be able to also share a PDF version of the presentations? I see that PowerPoints are on the website, but the files are like quite large and difficult for us to just email out to our community.
Oh, yeah, I can do that. Yes, of course. And I have your email, so I'll just send it to you, Daniel.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay. And you know what? What I'll do is I can send that to you as well oh, maybe here, this is it. Oh, okay. I found it. So the concerns on the appeals process. So the board of directors are members of the community, duly elected by the community. Appeals of denials of modification requests to be heard by the board of directors without including additional members of the community or other local governments on the hearing board by statute. The board of directors makes decisions on appeals from written orders by fire district staff to correct or eliminate a fire hazard or life hazard. Health and Safety Code Section 13870B, as in boy, the statutory provision reads as follows. Any person who has been ordered to immediately correct or eliminate a fire hazard or life hazard pursuant to subdivision A, and who believes that strict compliance with the order would cause undue hardship may, within 10 days, present a written request to the district board requesting a hearing on and a review of the order. The request shall state the reasons for making the request. So this language was given to us to have the authority, or the board of directors, through the health and safety code. So that is, but if that is not the desirable outcome, a resident certainly can go further if they want. We know how law works. You can hire any kind of attorney to go further than that.
It's a good idea in the guidelines document.
Yes, and that will be in the guidelines document explaining that as well.
All right. Yes, go ahead. Yes. Does it work? Yeah.
Yep. So in talking to various people about this, because I had heard this, you ought to get an inspection early thing. And talking to various people about Firewise and so forth, they said, oh no, you don't want to do that. The two things. One, the clock will start and you don't want your clock to start if you have an inspector come. And two, until all of the guidelines are fully worked out, you're going to have different inspectors applying things differently. It's going to be a crapshoot as to who you get and what you're told and so forth. So you want to wait until all of the guidelines are worked out, and this has been kind of in process for a while, so they can be modified and so forth before you do this, unless you absolutely have to. So
It's always interesting what people come up with. Okay, so first is, no, that's not correct. So I love when And this is why when people have concerns, I welcome people, email me, call me. Let me set your record straight so you're not going by hearsay and however people are drawing up their
That's why I'm here.
conclusions. Yes. So first, I would like to remind people that fire inspectors, they have been in this industry for a long time. We go through extensive training and classes. We enforce multiple codes. We deal with more life safety than, not saying with defensible space and home hardening, that is very textbook simple. We enforce much more with life safety, with buildings, with sprinklers, with fire alarms. We have to only do what the code says. Our job is to verify that what the code says has actually been done. And that's how everybody is trained. Now, when I have said in other workshops that we will work with you, what I mean is not that we're going to work with what the violations or corrections are. We will work with you on devising a plan on how to help you gain that compliance, how to go about complying with what the code says. But there is no room for interpretation. There is nothing to interpret. It's very straightforward. Your tree's limbed up 6 feet, it's 6 feet. 10 feet above your roof, it's 10 feet. I mean, zone 0 to 5 feet. All the inspectors are all trained the same way, no matter this code, the fire code, the building code, the mechanical code, the plumbing code. We have to know all these codes and enforce them for all buildings, not just homes, but any commercial building. And we do the work the same way every time. So there is no crapshoot. There is none. Every inspector is going to come and they're going to work with you as far as how to help you gain compliance, but not saying that's a violation or that's not. It's going to be the same for everybody. The uniqueness will be how your property is laid out. Everyone's property is so different. So from one property to the next, the same recommendation isn't going to be made as far as how your house is set up because everyone's property is unique, but the rules that are in place, the ordinance that what it states is going to be the same across the board.
Because you, in all of your workshops and so forth, you talk about, we don't want you tearing out all of your shrubbery and so forth. This is a process. This is a, what are the priorities and working through this. So that seems to me to make a lot of sense to get a picture of that early so that you can work forward. But, which is why I wanted to ask the question. as
So
far as the-
because people get concerned also with their privacy hedges, right? And as long as it's not in the 0 zone, you can have your privacy hedges as long as it's 5 feet away from your house. And you want to make sure that they are healthy and living and not full of dry, dead debris inside of it. It's getting it all cleaned up. So those hedges can exist. We're not, anything that's alive, well-maintained and healthy, they're going to stay. Because like I keep saying, that's not going to, those will survive long before your house does. The main thing is the recommendations from the home hardening. Defensible space is only part of the equation. The home hardening, that's a big one because that's really what's going to protect your house is how you are protecting your house from those embers landing. It's not so much the fire front. A lot of houses may never even be affected by the fire front. What they will be affected by is all
Is
the
the
flying
embers.
embers. Yes,
Right. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Sorry. So at one of the other meetings, we talked about having the guidelines document ready before people read the ordinance. And since the ordinance is going through a couple more reps.
We're going to talk about,
Oh, we are.
yep. Okay. Any other questions about the 2401? Okay. So when we get the final draft, this version will be all in black and we'll just have those deleted sections in red.
Right, you'll have the option of the 2 versions, the clean version and the markout version. Until once it's signed and approved on the website will just be the final signed copy.
And I need that a week before the meeting. Okay. So, and no questions from attendees. Okay, so I want to quickly just touch on the memo. Anyone have any, so next meeting, we'll have in our agenda packet the final draft. And we'll have the memo that I wrote that we can vote whether or not we want to endorse this. Is there any comments from the committee on the memo? Any comments on the from attendees on the memo? Great. So let's talk about the guideline document. So the fire marshal would like our committee to make comments on her drafts. And we're thinking about more along the lines of what conservation does with a subcommittee. And that way we don't have to wait for the agenda packet. It can be more meaningful because you can get a copy of the draft. You can mark it up and we can give it to her in a timely manner. So the question would be, would we have that be part of the mitigation subcommittee? Which makes a ton of sense because both MJ and D have extensive knowledge. I'd be willing to be part of a subcommittee if MJ and D don't want to do it. I think you guys know more about defense of the space than I do. I think I could add some worth. I don't think Nona or Wanda, you're going to fight me to do this. No. I mean, I certainly will add value, but I do think you guys know a lot more about defense of the space than I do. So how do you want to do this?
So what I hear you saying is, do we want to have the first round of edits, like you give it to our subcommittee and then we give you feedback directly?
You will be the only edit.
Okay.
She will give it to you, you will edit it up, you will talk to her, whatever you want to do as a subcommittee, you will talk to her. And then your
So for
comments.
this purpose, like, let me just ask a question. If I had a conservation committee, like a conservation concern, could I ask a question to Nona?
No, because you'd be in violation of the Brown Act.
Okay.
But if I were to give to the Conservation Committee and asking them to do their own edits, would that be okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great.
But
Yeah, we
you
can do
can't
that.
have a chain. You can't say, hey, D had a question. because
Right.
It's in.
But if I do directly to them, which we kind of already started that, so.
You guys want to do it?
Yeah, we accept. We're going to be seeing her guidelines first. Yes. Correct.
This is a whole separate document. It'll serve as an interpretation to the ordinance with diagrams and extra detailed information. They'll see it once it's published.
Yeah, the idea is to have like a layman's terms, right? Instead of the legalese that the ordinance has, it's really common language of how do you go about this?
Well, and that's what I brought up when we were discussing the ordinance, that it's actually in the ordinance that this guideline will be the district's way of communicating with us. So I think this will become a very robust document. Okay, so
Sorry, can I ask another question? Would it be okay if we did outreach to citizens to answer our questions? If MJ and I had a question, then I could ask you or someone else who's been following our work.
Yeah.
Great.
yeah, you just can't discuss it on the committee. Yeah, go ahead.
And I just had another question. How will the two subcommittees work together? Does it make sense to have a joint subcommittee between conservation and wildfire preparedness? Or will you sort of take the feedback from the
If
two
it's
subcommittees?
if it's okay with the whole Brown Act and all those things, if the subcommittees were, I don't have a problem with
Well,
it.
is Nona, are you on the subcommittee? Then you
Yes.
can't, then we can't do it because you're on this committee as well. And there'd be 3 members of this committee on the subcommittee. So the 2 subcommittees cannot talk to unless you
I
want.
hate the Brown Act.
Yeah, but
So
I disagree. There's
I
real
know.
benefits.
In general, I appreciate the Brown Act for like
I know,
big
I know.
government, but it really does impede
This type
Yes.
of work.
this type of community work. And we'll talk about that when we get to our subcommittee.
Well, if we had 7 members on our committee, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is we only have 5 members on our committee. So
And,
3 is a
and
quorum.
that's true even if I'm just the liaison from conservation to this committee, right?
But you're a member of the committee. You're a voting member of the committee.
That's okay. If it's 2 separate documents, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Unless Dee and Nona, you want to, unless you want to be on the subcommittee of 1, and then you can talk with Nona. Okay. Yeah, you can talk to anyone you want as long as it's not one of the people at this table.
Except for her, because we're on a
Well,
subcommittee.
yeah, you too. And then so the document is going to be in the agenda packet for the May workshop. So that's the timetable. I think it's really important.
Would it be in the April's packet since we're doing, because we're going to be adopting the guidelines in April with the second reading?
If you have it ready,
It'll
I'd
be,
love to
yeah, I want to
review it.
get it to you guys as soon as possible so that, because it needs to be adopted in the April.
Well, you're talking about get it to her for review.
Mhm.
You can send it to them today for
Okay.
review. And then when it's finished, I'll put it in the agenda packet. So if you have it completely finished, we'd love to have it and have the community look at it in April. But what's really important is that it's in the agenda packet for May for the workshop.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can send it to them. You can communicate directly with MJ and D. I don't copy me.
Okay.
I don't want to be part of it. I
Okay.
can't read the email. They'll have to
Okay.
arrest me.
But correct.
Maybe.
It'll be in the fire board's meeting for next month. Yes.
Right. She's going to try, but she has to get it to me a week before our meeting date.
Yeah, to
have
get it
be
into
in
their,
my
yeah,
so that would mean you'd have to get it to me in 3 weeks.
right.
So I'd love it, and then we can all discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on that? Any questions from attendee? Daniel?
Yeah, for the people that don't seem to be subject to the Brown Act, is it possible to share it from the WFPD website or something like that so the other communities can have a chance to take a look at the guidelines, please?
So once these 2 committees edit and give their recommendations, it'll be published to our website for everyone to view. But it will not be up for review as far as comments because it'll be what it is. It's not an ordinance that requires comments. I mean, you can comment, but nothing's going to change from it because it is a guideline that is being put out by the district.
But again, I could, if I wanted to, I could contact Daniel and
Yes.
ask him questions.
Sure. Sure.
Daniel, I would love to do that if you, if you would like.
Sure.
I'd
Yeah.
love your input, so we'll do it that way.
And I foresee a lot of revisions. I just know Kim and I foresee many, revisions as things need to be clarified. So, okay. So we're going to move on. So we're going to move on to item C, discuss the workshop. So the workshop now for the fire district will be in May, and our May meeting. You have any idea what you want to discuss at that meeting?
I wanted to cover, so we've done a lot of, defensible space talk because of this ordinance, but I wanted to bring more into that particular workshop on home hardening, but also incorporate the standards and guidelines so that people can have a chance to read it, ask questions, clarification, whatever it is, during that time.
And do you look confused? So next month's meeting is going to be, we're going to vote on the endorsing the ordinance, and then we're going to move the workshop that was supposed to happen in April to May.
Got it, thanks.
Also, just a side note, because of just trying to do more outreach and engage in the community in April. So April 11th, I will be at the Woodside Roberts Market host just a table information to discuss Q&A on the ordinance, standards and guidelines, whatever people have on that. It's going to be my safety topic of the month. But I am doing in general throughout the year, every couple of months or so, I'll be doing a fire marshal's fire safety corner. So I'll be all over the district, just so I'm hitting different communities. But I'm just starting for this one, given the magnitude of this ordinance. Roberts is going to allow me, so I'll be there on April 11th from 4 to 6. Town of Portola Valley, Roberts, I will be there on the 18th from 4 to 6. And then in the Bianchinis, that little area in the unincorporated area, that will be, I think the 25th is the Thursday after that. And that will be from 4 to 6 as well. And that will be just open session, open communication if people want to ask more questions or have concerns or whatever.
MJ, did you get all that? Do you want her to send you information on it?
I'll send it. Actually, Sharif it's going to be posted on the PV forum.
Oh, great.
You know, a lot of people don't read the PV forum. It'd be great to get it either in a tip or in the newsletter.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Well, I can have that. April
11, 18th.
Oh, and 25th.
Yes, I think that's a Thursday that follows. Let's see, it's the 3 Thursdays in a row.
'Cause I think those,
11, 18, and 25, yes.
but in different locations. Okay, all right. Okay. So any questions before we close that topic? Okay. We're gonna do subcommittee liaison updates, for finance and insurance, committee updates. We have a little update, Commissioner Laura announced a new regulation for insurance. I'm gonna go ahead and attend the, workshop on, I think it's April 27th. The last workshop that's 23rd, 27th. 11th, the 23rd. The last workshop for a regulation lasted 4.5 hours. I'm sure this one will be just as exciting. And what this regulation theoretically is going to be is, Kim, should they email you about that Firewise table? Okay. Is going to be that, the regulation is going to allow insurance companies to use the catastrophic model. That's, you know, because right now, you only can use, the insurance companies can only use historic modeling. So if you've had a wildfire, then they can charge you more because, well, if you've had a wildfire, you're going to have another one. And so that is one of the many reasons that insurance companies are leaving California. And so they have finally realized that in order to get insurance companies not to leave, they're going to allow this catastrophic modeling. And the workshop's going to be interesting because what I found with the last regulation is you really don't know what the regulation's doing till you go to the workshop and you hear everyone talk. But already I'm hearing that this catastrophic modeling is going to be a black box. So the insurance companies that, you know, there's a question of how much transparency there's going to be about what that modeling entails. So that's going to be the real question. So it's going to be interesting. Any questions about that? Okay. Conservation Committee update.
Okay, I have 3 things to report, actually maybe 4. So regarding the guidelines that Fire Marshal was talking about. So last month, our subcommittee from Conservation, after talking to Craig Taylor and sort of coming up with what we thought might be valuable for the guidelines, we submitted to Kim a set of proposed guidelines for Zone 0 to see if we're kind of on track with what she's looking for. And she thanked us and said that that was very helpful, but we haven't seen sort of where she is now on the guidelines. But, you know, it was really interesting to sort of say, what does it really mean for zone zero? Is it really down to bare earth? And if so, what are the exceptions that are allowed? So in last month's conservation meeting, I put up the table that we had submitted to Kim on, what it meant in terms of what kinds of plants were actually allowed in zone zero. So we'll see more on that. The second thing is an issue that has come up with the Conservation Committee is that we are responsible for evaluating tree removal requests in town. And one of the things that we have found in some cases is that residents ask to remove trees, saying that their fire insurance company wants them removed. And in some cases, we actually think it's not necessary based on the ordinance the draft ordinance. And it might even not be very wise ecologically because they might be on a slope, which could be unstable
Do they
for a
have letter
variety of
from-
reasons.
From the insurance company? Do they have a letter from the insurance?
So what we'd like to recommend to the town is that if that's the case, I mean, obviously, we don't want to deprive anyone of fire insurance. But it would be nice and it'd be beneficial to the town as well, I think, to have, sort of a record of what the fire insurance companies are requiring. So we're asking that when that's the case, that the homeowner submit the letter that they received. So that's number 2.
Huh.
The third thing is that we also work on advising the town on town center garden and other open space maintenance issues. And it's really clear to us that the schoolhouse here doesn't really comply with the defensible space ordinance. So we thought that the subcommittee that works on that might begin to think about what needs to change around the town buildings as sort of a revamp of the town center gardens.
They don't have ember resistant vents either.
Well, we're not talking about, home hardening. We're really just talking about the defensible space. And so, there's a beautiful CNO that's right outside, which is in zone zero. Okay. And then the last thing, I may have mentioned this at an earlier meeting. One of the things that we had hoped to do with Kim on the guidelines is to encourage people to submit photos of how they are complying with the different zone requirements. So especially zone zero, if people could, we thought we would go on PB Forum and just ask townspeople to submit photos. And that would help all of us, I think, understand what zone zero should look like in Porthole Valley. I know Kim has been looking for pictures online and we sent her some as well, but there's nothing like bringing it really close to home to know what it should look like. So that's all.
I think that's great. Thank you. Any questions for conservation?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear everything you said about the removal.
Yeah, so if people in town want to remove a significant tree, the tree permit goes to the Conservation Committee, and we send out 3 people to sort of say, does it make sense for this tree to be removed? But if a homeowner says, I want to remove this tree because my insurance company said I have to, do we just not even evaluate it, or do we actually say, please submit some kind of evidence?
Oh, so your decision right now is you're just gonna ask them to give you the letter.
Well, it's not up to us to ask for that, I don't think. I think that's a town level decision in terms of what's required with the permit removal.
Well, you just recommend to the town, right?
Yeah, the town relies pretty much on what we say about tree removals. The requests come to the Conservation Committee, but we're never going to say, if your insurance company requires you to remove a tree, there's either no point in us reviewing it because the town doesn't want to be responsible for someone being deprived insurance.
That's right.
My understanding. Does that make sense, Craig? Right, yeah. But I think that then it should have the letter from the insurance company, I think. Yeah. Right.
Oh, no, so what you're really saying is that you think that the town should not give you the request in the first place. Is that what you're saying?
If the town is just gonna approve it based on what the insurance company requires, then there's no point in.
Yeah.
approving it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Craig, did you have a question?
So for the Conservation Committee, have you guys gotten an inspection from the fire department of the old schoolhouse?
Yeah.
Because I think it might be worth, even if it's an informal one, it might help think about how the guidelines are working. And it might help to have them say, well, if this were a house, this is what we would be asking you to do. Rather than assuming we know what to do and then starting to come up with a landscape plan, maybe we get the inspection first, just as a way of sort of understanding better how this process is going down. I also think it would probably be good for the citizens to see, the town living by the same standard.
Yeah, I mean, that's the intent is to apply the ordinance. But that's a great idea to ask for an inspection. Who would actually do that? Who would ask for
I
it?
would ask Sharif. And maybe it's an informal one because they're not doing the whole town center. They're only,
Yeah.
but I think you still get the same, the benefit, I think, is we had an inspector here who treated this like a home and then gave us their input. And whether it's through a formal process or whether it's more informal because they're not doing the entire town center, I think I would just check in with Sharif.
Well, then I think it would be good if they're gonna do that, if the inspector is gonna come, then maybe it should be a public workshop as well.
I was going to
because
say
I
the
think
same
it-
thing. That's very informative, right? And make this more friendly.
Yeah,
like
it'd
that's
be very instructive, I think.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I don't know.
Yeah, well, again, I would check in with Sharif, but yeah, no, I think if we can make it so that people see how an inspector operates and what to expect when they show up at their house, yeah, that could be a great thing.
And we'd have a written report and we could use that as a model. We could actually even discuss it during a meeting. We could put it in the agenda packet so people can see what it looks like. We could YouTube it. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
okay. All right. So, mitigation committee update. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Questions?
So the meeting was recorded and we did, I put it up on the Zoom link, so the table should be there.
Go to
the
YouTube
10.
and you type, Portola Valley. You could say Portola Valley Conservation Committee. You could say Portola Valley, what did they call it? Just Portola Valley, and it has its own channel. Yeah, but but if you typed in Portola Valley Conservation Committee, it would come up. You could. It's,
And, I was really, explicit that those were our recommendations. That Kim had not reviewed them yet.
She's got to balance Woodside and Portola Valley, and, it's going to be very interesting to see those guidelines. Okay. Any questions? No. Okay, mitigation subcommittee update.
Yeah, we've been working with our fellow Firewise communities. We've done some outreach for the folks that have already established, in the Alpine Hills. We talked to their president, Joyce Sheffren. And then we also met with Patty Dews, who is heading up the Westridge Firewise community. And we spoke to Chip Swanson, who also is helpful in all of these. Our overall goal is to see what this committee can do to help educate and support more neighborhoods becoming Firewise. So MJ was pretty much up to speed, but it was good for me to go through the application process and see what they're required to do. And what this has led to is there's an educational outreach portion that each neighborhood should they'll have their plan for the year and their goals for the year. And there's a list of activities or events that happen, suggested goals for each neighborhood. So we were just kind of brainstorming, seeing what we could do as this committee to help support. There is a Wildfire Community Preparedness Day in the first Saturday of May. This is like a nationwide event. And we were just thinking maybe we could start small and have a table that has Firewise information. We as the subcommittee would table an information booth, have a place for folks to come and ask questions, and also get people in contact with whoever's in charge of their neighborhood, right? Like, so who is your block captain? Just a place of support. Also kind of in lieu of the Wildfire Preparedness Day that we had, since we're not having the fair this year. We want to make sure that we're doing some education and outreach. And I had the idea of maybe doing it on Thursdays when we're having our farmers market. So we maybe get some interest and get some ideas of folks that are coming here anyway. I wanted to, support Chief Giuliacci with that. She had first set up a workshop for the 17th. But if that's not going to happen, maybe we could still just start this in May. And I appreciate Jennifer reached out to Sharif to see what kind of permission we need to get. Also, we would love to, let people know, right? If you have questions, you could come see the Firewise table. And also we would be inviting the presidents of those neighborhoods to come and speak to the people that are in their neighborhood. I really do think that the success these communities are going to be, they're just seeing who shows up. It kind of always is the same people that have the concerns and that do the work. But we don't know unless we put ourselves out there. So the proposal is to have a Firewise table, and we're not yet sure of frequency. And then I'm going to turn this over to MJ. She did some, she had the idea of a map.
So on the Firewise table, so Sharif liked the idea.
Okay.
There's not any problems, even if you wanted to do it more often. I made a plug for Firewise. I reminded him and I pointed him to the minutes. And Kim said she wants you to contact her with the information because she may want to join you at the table.
Great. That would be fantastic. And then we have a great map. It's an older map that MJ has colored in the proposed neighborhoods. I'll let you speak to.
Oh, yeah, I had this, when I was on the cable committee, it must be 10 minutes ago, that we tried to well. So anyway, so I took this map that Howard had printed for us and I colored in, the green is all that's currently approved fire-wise community. And then yellow is the West Ridge community that Patty Hughes has put together. And, you know, it's kind of ballooned up now. I didn't know it. Now includes Johnny Pass and all of Cervantes. And it does West Ridge all the way down to Portola Road. So now it incorporates 476 homes. So if this gets approved, this is basically 25% of homes approved out. So, so I just thought when we do this table, I didn't know if people saw this map, they might get more information. So I kind of brought it here just to get more info, how we could get more people involved.
Has she submitted that application?
She, you know, she's on in like third year. I don't know if that one has,
Have they asked her for revisions?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Like what?
It's a long story, right? It gets, and as our marshal has said, the Firewise program itself has been inundated. And so, I think just as a matter of fact, if anything was wrong, it got kicked back with revisions. So, an example is, not using an updated form. But some of the things are also very specific, like you haven't created a more, a consistent map. Like they want to make sure there was an issue that we kind of had a donut effect in Westridge. So they just want to make sure it's contiguous neighborhoods. There's some very valid concerns about why something would get kicked back. The goals, they want to be very specific on the goals. Patty's doing a great job. She's, following through and hopefully it'll go through this time.
Is she getting the support? Does she feel like she's getting the support she needs?
Well, that was the other reason that we reached out. It's like, what can we do as a committee to support you? Is there something that we need to do? And I love the idea of a map. Everybody kind of wants to see where their parcel is. I think also if we can get this, then people can see who they're, especially with Westridge. I'm a resident of Westridge. They're large lots. It's hard to get to know your neighbors. It's hard to know, what's happening. And so I hope that this will encourage folks to reach out to their neighbors and understand, because you have to work as a small block or, precinct. So we're prepared to do that if we have the blessings of the town council and of this committee to hold that table.
I do not need, I don't think we need to take a vote yet. Do it. Do it.
Yes. No. That you only need 8 homes as a minimum. Yeah. Yeah. And again, we're not sure if this is going to help with insurance companies or not. If it does, that'll just be a bonus, for insurance companies to say, yes, I am, a member of a Firewise community. But I think what's more important is just, again, folks talking to each other and asking questions and, what have you done or who have you used or how do I get a vendor here or how do I get a contractor here? I hope that we can instigate more discussions and just be helpful neighbors, really.
Well, I believe the current regulation is if you have a standard insurance company, they must give you at least 10% off. And even Cal,
I don't think I think
No?
that is changing. I think it's a rapidly changing environment.
wasn't that in the last
It
regulation?
that used to be kind of one of the reasons people would do this. But it's changing.
Because I know the Fair Plan sued because the last regulation was going to make the Fair Plan get them 10% off and they sued. And I don't know what the status of that. Well, I'm shocked. Most
Anything else?
insurance companies give you 10% off.
Yeah, I think I read that the fair plan was down to 5%, but for Firewise. But the thing is, going Firewise is not going to get people insurance. I mean, like I've told you that the whole insurance market right now is so chaotic, and it's going to take a couple years for things to settle out. But it's very clear to me that what's going to become very crucial to getting insurance in the future is whether or not your community is acting together. And so this gets us on the right road, for when things, insurance gets a little better in the 2 or 3 years. But
And-
yeah, the next 2 or 3 years are going to be bad.
And I didn't think it would get you insurance, but I thought it would get you a discount. I'm really surprised.
Well, yeah, but the main thing is.
Yeah. Daniel, question.
This is more sharing information. We did a little survey in Ladera just to see what was going on with people's insurances as relates to Firewise communities. And depending on which carrier it was, some of them gave no discount. Some of them gave like a small discount, like 2% for a community. And some of them had like a little bit more, like 5% if your specific property was like up to every standard. But none of them were as high as 10%. So that at least that was our small survey. Just a little info for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good information. Craig.
So just to follow up in the end of this conversation, my understanding was that insurance companies could require that you be potentially part of a Firewise community. And if you're not, they could potentially cancel your insurance, which is different than giving a 10% discount. So it was one of the things that they were allowed to put on their list as a requirement for them to insure you. And the problem is, of course, if they do it and then they give you, a month to comply and you're not in a Firewise community, you're not going to get into the Firewise community in time. So I think it's potentially right now more of a preventing something from happening than actually being a big bonus. But I think that the main thing about Firewise should be education. And I would ask, I think one thing the subcommittee can do is you might want to check in with Chip Swan.
We did.
Okay, well, let me finish the
Okay, sorry.
sentence. Because what I heard from him is Kim was going to require inspections for all homes to become a Firewise community, which if she does that, will probably put an end to Firewise applications. I know at least 2 communities that were talking about it. When they heard that, they said, okay, well, we're going to stop. We're not going to bother. It's going to be too hard. Because part of what's made this work to date is this is about education. This is about getting people involved. This is not about enforcement. And Chip believes, and I concur with him, is that she's conflating enforcement with education. And I think it's actually a very bad sign. So he's had further conversations with her. You might want to follow up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. He brought up his concern to us as well. And one of the things that she said tonight is that Fireside is actually putting in Firewise, like a module for Firewise. So it is on our radar. We will be having a discussion with her. Again, how do we make this work? So I haven't heard from her, and I'd like to hear from her first about what her outlook is. That again, things are happening like you said. Our ordinances is still being modified. Our guidelines are being modified. We're hitting this on several fronts at once. And that's just part of it. It's another piece, like our ordinance, it seems like our ordinance is going to require an assessment or an inspection from our, fire district, at least in the next 3-year cycle. Everybody is going to have an inspection from, right? So,
Yeah,
it's a moving game a little bit, and we're just gonna, I'd like to work with her and be able to express this concern and see what she has to say to offer,
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear how she perceives the difference between the fire department's approval, which is different than the Firewise approval, but the district has to do their part of it. How what they've done in the past is going to be different than what she perceives going forward. And I think the critical element here is I really believe you don't want to conflate education with enforcement.
I agree 100%.
And,
I do.
and that's to me, that's the very worrisome, avenue. And I don't know if she sees that or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can she insist? I mean, with the Firewise approval process? I mean, I didn't think that
The
the,
district has a
district-
role to play, and if they're not going to play unless they play on her rules, then she'll effectively stop Firewise. Because basically, one of the things you have to do to
No.
your application is you have to have the district come out, and it's meant to be a community assessment, not an individual assessment.
Correct.
So she's turned it into individual assessments. And I get that she wants to be able to
Well-
run numbers and stuff, and she could still do that. But at least the way she's pitching it right now, she's pitching it as individual inspections, where if they just drove by and said, okay, fine, we're going to mark where there's wood shake roofs and where there's wood
Yeah.
siding and stuff, but we're doing it on a community basis. That's kind of what we did before, but what Firewise requires from the district is that you give that community a summary of the risks within the community, not individualized, but a summary. And she's kind of converted it, and that's. the
Well,
concern here.
I don't think there's anything wrong. Like I appreciated what she said tonight. Let's see if I can say this succinctly. I think we're all working for the same goal. I mean, I think that's our compass, right? It's like, let's all try to think about the goal that we're all working for. And if she can get data from her individual inspections and have that in her Fireside app, and then the district can pull from that data to help Firewise communities get their applications in, then that's a win-win. Up to this point, like for Westridge, they did a drive-by, right? Like there was a certain percentage of homes that they just took the information that they could from the street. So again, it's helpful for us. We're going in and talking to each president who is doing this proposal and who's doing this application. We're just going to see what we can do to facilitate getting that application in. I think that's the most important part at this point. But at some point, I think they're all going to merge, right? The data is going to merge.
Yeah, the problem is between now and 3 years. In 3 years, I agree, then it will make no difference. They'll inspect
Exactly.
everything. But that's not the case today. So there's a,
well,
or-
we shouldn't have, this wasn't on the agenda to have a whole discussion about, but
I think
Yeah.
that, what I would recommend is talk to Chip Swan. I would also recommend there's a Woodside Highlands, Woodside West, and Skyline group that's in process. It's around 350, 400 homes, and they feel pretty shut down by this. So that's a group you could help.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Craig.
um,
I think that's it
what
for
you're
us.
doing is fantastic. What you're doing is fantastic. I've wanted to work on Firewise for years. I think this is so vital, and just pursue it and let me know what you need, if you need anything. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so anything you need, I'm here. Because I did do some research on Firewise, and I'm happy that you're doing it now, but if you need anything. I also wanted to let you guys know that I did check with Sharif about the status of deck report. And he said that he really tried to get the information for us for this meeting. He's focused on this. They are working on that deck report. They have not forgotten it. And they're very appreciative of what you guys did.
Great.
So we should have status on that next month. Okay. Do you, and think about also if you want to put to the agenda, because now we're on to agenda is there any questions also on what we've just discussed in the attendees? Oh, okay. If you want something on the agenda for next month, we're gonna have time. Maybe you want to discuss Firewise, do something more of a presentation, do more of but just think about it. Let me know in 2 to 3 weeks. Really appreciate it. Quorum check for next month. Everybody think? Okay, just to reiterate, MJ, the workshop's going to be in May. So next month, we should have a short meeting. Okay, do I have a motion to second? Okay, yep, show of hands, meeting is stopped. Thank you, everyone, for attending.